Welcome to Ask the Hiring Manager. I'm Leslie Hunter, president of Resume Makeover. I've been helping job seekers for nearly a decade to acquire their dream jobs and achieve the income they desire, from entry-level applicants to C-suite executives and everyone in between. From your resume to your cover letter, LinkedIn profile, bio, or website content, I'm here for you. And now I'm going to open the door and interview some of the top hiring managers so that you can have the insight that you need to book the jobs that you want. Welcome to Ask the Hiring Manager. Welcome everyone to the next episode of Ask the Hiring Manager. I have with us today a very special guest, Matt Lunny, Manager of Client Development and Recruitment for the Bolton Group. Matt, it's great having you here.
Awesome. I appreciate you having me on the show. I'm very excited to chat with you and hopefully provide some value to the people out there watching.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You'll have tons of value to add. I know that. And you work with the Bolton Group. What type of company is the Bolton Group?
So, we're a small staffing and recruiting company based out of Atlanta, Georgia, in the Buckhead area. We all work remote. We have a couple different offices. I focus on the Southeast, Georgia, and Florida, but we have offices all over the U.S. We're a small firm that specializes in accounting and finance recruitment. We do get some other roles here and there as well, but mainly accounting and finance.
And regarding the companies or clients that you and the Bolton Group work with, are they, I know you mentioned finance and accounting, are they specifically finance companies or do the companies cover all sectors?
Yeah, so we cover all sectors. They're just finance jobs. We do have some finance companies we work with within private equity or even some banks that we work with. We also work in construction, we work in manufacturing, we work with a couple of the largest retailers in the US as well. So we kind of have a broad spectrum. Every company has an accounting and finance department that's a sizable company. So we try to help solve their staffing needs for accounting and finance.
That's great. What are some of the more well-known company names that you recruit talent for, if you're able to share, of course?
Most of the companies I have NDAs for, and in the staffing industry, obviously there's a lot of companies, so we don't want to give an edge to people that are looking to find new business by announcing. I can tell you, we do work with over 200 companies across the U.S. About 30 of them are Fortune 100 companies that are very, very well-known name companies. And then we also work with some medium-sized and some smaller companies too, as well.
Great. And you mentioned working with companies throughout the U.S. Does it span throughout the whole U.S. or are there specific regions that your clients are focused in or located?
So I focus on the Southeast, but we have clients and offices across the U.S. Some companies have offices here in Florida, and then they'll have an office in California and Texas. We support all their openings. As far as, direct employees with the Bolton Group, we work remotely and they're all over the country. And a lot of them build their own business locally as well. So there's really not a lot of areas within the U.S. that we don't support, except for like Hawaii and Alaska, I would say. But we also even support some international companies that are based out of, one company's out of Ireland, one company's out of England.
Cool.
We support their U.S. operations. So
Very
we have
cool.
some international clients also.
And so you work as a recruiter. That's one of your job functions. How do you go about finding eligible candidates for your clients?
Great question. Depends on the market, depends on what I'm looking for. Some of the roles we post a job and I'll get, 30, 40 applications for people. And I just kind of sift through those. And then other jobs, we do what we call hunting. I use LinkedIn Navigator on the back end, put in some specific things that you're looking for in candidates and find those candidates, reach out to them directly, send messages. Some people have their emails or phone numbers public on profiles. So, pick up the phone and just give them a quick call, see if they're interested in a new role and kind of discuss what they're looking for. So those are basically the two approaches. And then there's always referrals, which are a great compliment. And when you place somebody or when you're working with somebody and then they're like, hey, I have a friend, they're looking for a job. Can you help me out? So that's another way as well. But as far as like how we find people that, without a referral is job postings and just hunting mainly on LinkedIn.
That makes sense. That totally makes sense. Do you find that do you find that you hunt more than people reaching out to you, or?
Yeah, for the senior roles especially, you're definitely doing a lot more hunting, and especially when people have jobs, you have to have kind of that right fit for them, and not every job, even if it is a good job, is the right fit for the candidate. But just kind of getting to know them is what I like the most, and just kind of talking to them, be like, hey, I have no problem telling somebody like, hey, this isn't a fit for you, but let's keep in touch because I might have a job next week or next month that is a fit if you are open to it. And I would say about 80% of people, when you reach out to them, are at least like, hey, I'm open to a conversation, about, looking at a new role.
Yes. Yeah. And that makes sense. As you mentioned about, if there's something available, it's kind of good to keep them in the pipeline, so to say, especially if you like them and you feel that they have a lot of skills and background that would be good for a role. Maybe just at the time, it's not the right type of role for them.
Yeah. And you can also pro market people as well. If somebody says to me, I want to work with, ABC Corporation, and it's a company that I work with, I can reach out to a couple of managers I know and be like, hey, I got somebody, really good resume. They're looking for this. Do you have any openings on your team or any other teams that might be a fit? Sometimes you can help people that way, because sometimes they might have been overlooked by, internal HR or another job posting that was put up.
Yes. And in addition to working as a recruiter, you also serve as a hiring manager on behalf of your clients for certain roles, I believe.
Yeah, for certain roles, generally our, kind of our lower level roles. We do the interview process, the background screen, the drug screen, whatever they would require to work with us. And it would be a contract to hire roles or just a straight contract role for something like that. So,
Okay.
We take care of the process there for them. Some of the companies do still like to have, quick 30-minute or less interview just to make sure everything's lined up and we hit all the marks. But we do offer that service as well, for our clients to save them from having to go through the whole interview process, which sometimes can be a lot, especially when you're a manager trying to, run a team and do your day-to-day work and hire.
Plus hire.
Yeah.
Totally. And you mentioned that what are some of you mentioned contract roles, but within those contract roles, when you do step in as a hiring manager, are they specifically, can you give an example, like accounting?
Yeah, for those types of accounting roles, generally it's more along the lines of transactional accounting. So
Okay.
accounts payable, accounts receivable, collections, cash apps, rules along those lines. Generally, depending on the area and the pay rates for the area, but they're usually hourly roles and not a salary role. Usually about 55 to 60K or under if you looked at it as total comp for the year.
Okay. And what are, in the hiring manager type of role that you do, what are a few questions you may ask a candidate in an interview? What are some of the things that you're looking for?
The first thing I generally look for in an interview is, their presence, how they show up. It is a professional interview. We do the interviews through either Zoom or Microsoft Teams, but we still want someone to show up well, dressed professionally, decent background, doesn't have to be, perfect, but, you want something that's presentable. You don't want, a bad poster. As far as like specific questions, it kind of depends on the role. Before we do the interview, we generally do a phone screen to kind of get some of the basics out of the way to make sure they are qualified. Like, hey, for example, if it's accounts payable or receivable, hey, have you worked with certain softwares? Have you done two-way matching, three-way matching? things like that you kind of have already discussed before you actually set up the more formal Zoom interview. But then once you get into the interview, it's more of like behavior questions, seeing how they're gonna react if there's an issue. One of the questions is like, hey, can you walk me through a time you made a mistake and how you addressed it? That's a huge character question.
Yeah.
Little sidebar, I literally had somebody not get a job because they told a company they never made a mistake at the end of the month closing. And I'm
Oh,
5 years in a job and you never made one mistake, and literally died on that hill at the interview, even though I
wow.
coached her not to do that in the final interview. That's one good question. One good question is like, what does culture mean to you? Everybody, that's a huge buzzword these days. Hey, I want a company with good culture. Awesome. What does that mean?
Right. That's a
Because
great question.
to some people, good culture means we have a ping pong table and free frozen yogurt in the break room. To other people, it means like, hey, on Wednesday, my kid has a soccer game and I want to leave at 3 o'clock to pick him up from school, bring him to the game, and I'll log back on at 8 o'clock and finish my 2 hours of work. And there's a work-life balance culture. To some people, it's, like, hey, I want to just do my 40 hours a week and not get into overtime. So culture is going to be very different depending on the person you're talking to. When it comes to that, there's definitely a lot of different questions that you can ask when kind of interviewing people and trying to see what they're fit for. A lot of it that has to depend on the role, and a lot of it, are going to be like kind of behavioral questions. How do you deal with timelines? How do you organize your day? Like, what does that look like when how do you like to be managed? Are you the type of person that wants to walk in every day and you know what to do and you just get started and you go? Are you the type of person that at least twice a week has to have a 20-minute conversation with your supervisor of like, hey, this is what needs to be completed by the end of this week, here's your time frame to do it, and let's get it done? And then there's also micromanagers, which we don't like, but they want to check in with you every day, beginning and end of the day. So
That's
those are a couple different, kind of more character and like job fit questions and actual skill questions that I like to ask on interviews. Again, a lot of the skill questions like, hey, what softwares have you used? And processes and stuff like that, I generally ask initially in the phone screen conversation.
I like, I mean, those are very interesting questions. As you mentioned, it could be from kind of character building questions. I love the culture question because you're so right. I mean, as you mentioned, someone could think it's, having the work-life balance. Some could, just have the laid back environment. Some it could be in like more
Yeah.
diversity, equity, inclusion, or more of the kind of diverse, environment. So that's a great question. I think that's like good also for viewers, for applicants to keep that in mind, because you're right, it is a buzzword today, like culture, company culture. But
Yeah.
I think so many people don't think about, well, what does that actually mean? Or what does that mean to me? Right.
And kind of on the flip side, and I know we'll probably talk about this later, is you want to ask questions to the person interviewing them. And when it comes to culture, as far as companies, one of my favorite questions to coach people to ask is like, hey, when you're talking to them, you're applying, for example, for a staff accountant role, kind of entry level, just got out of college, 1 or 2 years. Ask them about somebody within the company that had an idea that wasn't in management that they implemented, because that'll show you value of employees and not just we're here to do the work we're told to do. It shows that you care about your employees' input and their growth and their ideas, because people feel more valued if you implement something the team comes up with, or you as an individual.
Absolutely. That's a really good thing to think about, for sure. Oh, and there's one thing too before I go to kind of switching to the next thought process. You mentioned that I think it was a lady, but the applicant who
Yeah.
was asked if they had made a mistake, or they said that they hadn't made a
They
mistake.
hadn't made a mistake on a month-end closing in accounting.
Wow. First of all, my question was, did she not get the job based on how she answered that because they were, because I guess we're human and it's a human thing to make a mistake?
They literally, and so she had said it in her, and this was more of a senior level role for a manager.
Sure.
She had said it in her initial interview, and the manager had made a point about it.
Gotcha.
Said, listen, you've been in accounting for 5 years. You've been a manager for 2. There's no way. We're all humans, man. We make mistakes. And basically, a lot of times what they're looking for is you to be like, hey, I made a mistake. I owned up to it. I was part of the, I helped fix it, or I went to this manager to get help to fix it. Something along those lines, to say you never made a mistake. It's preposterous. In 5 years, So she had an in-person interview, and the manager, they did a one-on-one with the same manager, but just in person. And then she had another interview with with a senior manager. And they basically both asked her that question again, just to kind of see where she was at. And she still died on that hill. And literally they're like, we would have offered her this job, but there's no way that we can believe that in over 6 years, there wasn't one mistake made in your professional career.
Okay, so maybe it came down to the honesty factor.
Yeah, it's definitely an integrity thing. I mean, nobody's perfect. Nobody,
That's true.
It was just the thing, like, just, and a lot of times, and with the interview questions too, kind of like a B level to like, as an interviewee side of things, give examples,
That's true.
You can be like, for that, even if you made something minor into something major, but you fixed it, even if you fixed the issue, to say you never had an issue or never made a mistake.
Yeah, I can see where that makes sense. I mean, and if the woman was being honest, in one way, that's great if she doesn't make mistakes, but I also understand completely, where you all as hiring managers and as the company that's going to hire is looking at. So notes to candidates and viewers out there, even if you're pretty much perfect.
Find a little mistake and just be like, tell somebody you learned from it. Just be
exactly.
Like,
I think the key, like what you were saying, is
that
even if you have a almost spotless track record, to think of at least one or incident or two where it was a growth experience, where it was a growth experience. Right. And you made it into something good. Right. Exactly. So that's really good for people to hear, because I think that there are, maybe executives, although this person you mentioned, I think was may have been higher level, but I think maybe executives might get that message more, hopefully. But there are, especially younger candidates, entry level, or maybe even mid-level, who think, okay, I need to tell the hiring managers what they want to hear, but maybe thinking that what they want to hear is perfect.
Not correct.
Right, exactly. Not what they want to hear. So no one's perfect. So give that example of where you've grown. That's good. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that that's good for people to hear. Yes. And so, I'm sure you're looking, it's clear between your recruiting duties and your hiring manager duties that you're looking at resumes all the time. How much of the time do you feel that you spend reviewing people's resumes?
As far as like reviewing resumes, it probably is a solid like 35 to 40% of my prospecting for candidates for a role of who I'm going to call and set up the interviews with and stuff along those lines. So as far as like going through candidates, that's definitely a solid amount of time of reviewing resumes. And my schedule generally, the first part of my morning is set apart just to, 1, follow up on emails, and 2, review resumes. And then it kind of sets up my day, because after I review them, I basically go through and say, okay, these are the people that I do want to call. And then I make those calls and set up interviews for either later that day or for the next day.
Mhm.
But
Makes
yeah,
sense.
I spend a fair time. And then even throughout the day, if I get new applications on job posts or if I get an email from somebody, looking for something, then I definitely, will stop and look at it and, definitely don't want to miss a good candidate because I didn't take a second to look at their resume.
That's true. That makes sense. Do you, and this kind of triggered me to ask too, because you said you didn't want to miss a good candidate. Do you find that, is it, I've never done recruiting, but is it a tough market, so to say, meaning, let's say that you didn't follow back quickly with a candidate. Do you find that, it's pretty common for the candidate to either be swept up by another recruiter or
Good
to,
candidates are always, no matter what the market's like, are always needed.
yes.
We have a joke that's, hey, does anybody have any senior accountants? Because senior accountants, it seems like every company's always looking for senior accountants, and that senior accountant level title, depending on what companies are looking for, could be different things. But as far as that, there are definitely candidates that get swept up all the time, and the better your resume is, the better chance you have to get swept up or to have people reach out to you. Um, as just a blanket statement, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that kind of relates to my next question, which is like for having a good resume. Do you use an applicant tracking system when searching for candidates who may be, or job applicants who may be good candidates for your clients?
Yeah, so I do not right now use an ATS system, but I do use like CRM systems.
Okay.
As it's kind of an application that does the sales side of things as well as applicants. And with both systems, to be honest, a lot of times resume formats are super important, of how they actually come through, because it is a software and the software tells it how to read a resume. And sometimes when some people, marketing people seem to be the worst. I've worked with a couple of them in the past of like this really cool format. They have their picture, they have all sorts of things that shows that they're a creative person. Software doesn't know that. Software reads code. So when
Mm-hmm.
you have like your skills in a little box that's blue up off the left, it may say box blue, and then your skills are jumbled and it might be in the middle of a job description. But yes, I have used applicant tracking systems in the past. A few of them. I've used a couple of the big ones. ICMS I worked with for many years. I've worked with Salesforce. I've worked with Workday. I've worked with ADP. A couple other ones that I can't think of right now, that have the option to upload resumes into and view them.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's, as you mentioned, with CRM, ATS, there's nowadays we're in such a obviously technical world. And now with AI on the rise on top of that, yeah, it's super, it's something that's quite common to use some type of software.
Yeah, absolutely. And the softwares are getting better than what they were, because it used to be if it wasn't in like a Word format or doc format, it wouldn't even read it at all. They're getting a little bit better with reading the resumes that are in PDF form.
Okay.
Um, you know, but yeah, it can definitely deter somebody from calling you, because sometimes in some of those formats, literally on the back end, a resume will come in as one giant, like it'll say like resume, and it'll just be like one giant brick, and it'll just say like literally continuously like name, phone number, email, LinkedIn profile, skills, list all the skills, and there's no space, no
Oh
nothing.
gosh.
And it could be a beautiful resume when you open it up on your computer, but when it goes into that software doesn't compute it as such.
I know. And do you find that that's for primarily like the PDF, or you're saying?
PDF, yeah.
Yeah, right. I was
They're
gonna
getting a
say.
little bit better with different softwares that I've used for PDFs, but for the most part, Word docs, because they don't have any of that programming language. Just like if you go to edit something, it's a lot easier to edit a Word doc than it is to edit a PDF. If you're not
Yes.
the, once it's fully created. Um, so I mean, just as a general rule of thumb, if you're going to do a PDF, use one of the free converters and have yourself a Word copy of it as well.
Yes, that's a good reminder too. And I remind my clients of this as well, but it's good for, viewers to know too. I send out both like resume and Word documents to my clients, but I always try to remind that, it's best to submit a Word document form. A PDF, I at least mention to my clients that it's, just for viewing purposes to make sure, because there's, depending on if somebody has a Mac or whatever type of programs they can show differently. So I always have that as a backup, or if they're printing it and literally handing it to someone,
Yeah.
PDF is fine. But for the tracking systems, it's better to submit the Word document.
Yeah.
For sure. And then when you review candidates' resumes, especially when you're like manually, looking at it, what are some of the things that you're looking for in a resume? What stands out to you in a financial or accounting resume, for example?
So, as without getting into like their work experience, I'm on the board of like, hey, let's have a clean resume. Name, contact information on top. Don't put your address. I've preached this.
Right.
Too much information out on the web, and literally, it's too easy to get information as it is. But just giving somebody access to even more information about you. No company's ever going to ask for your address on a resume. So just leave it off there. You want to put like your town that you live in so that they have it in reference, like great, or even your zip code. Like I live in Jacksonville, we have 30 zip codes up here. And, depending on what part of the city you're in, you may not travel to another part for work just because of the distance and how big of a city it is. But, your contact information, you could put it objective. That's one of those things that's kind of hit or miss in my world. If you can do a generic one, or you can change it for every company. It depends on what you want to do. Some people like doing them, and I tell them, hey, feel free, but when you do it, make sure it is specifically for that role. And then if you're applying for a new role that's similar but not exactly the same, then you're going to have to change it. But then, I like to have your work experience, your education on the bottom, and then, skills. I like the work experience with bullet points, and then, depending on how long they've had the role and what type of role it is. If it's like, a staff accountant role, I want like probably 4 to 6, maybe 7 bullet points of, what you did on a day-to-day basis. And then, at the bottom, you don't need to include like end of month closeout and stuff like that. That's kind of already understood in those types of roles. But, at the bottom, the softwares that you've worked with, any certificates that you've got, if you've got, any certificates that, are like kind of continued education. Unless it's a software one, I really want to put the Google certificates, because I don't want to say they're a joke, but they're kind of a joke, except for the software ones. I mean, honestly, most of those you can knock out in like 2 hours. And it's like, I've had people tell me I'm certified in accounting because I took a 2-hour class and I gave them like a basic 10 question multiple choice, like, hey, list these as credits or debits. What part of the general ledger would this go on? And they couldn't answer 10 basic questions that, you would learn in accounting 101, just getting a regular degree. But yeah, I know we talked about this through I'm not sure if it was through our text messages, but I talked about it on my last podcast. If you don't have a degree, unless you're still in school, currently actively taking classes, don't put like I went to the University of, Podunk State in 1980 and I almost graduated at the bottom. Just
Right.
put where you have a degree from, or if you're in school. If you started in 98 and you're still going, I'm proud of you. Get that degree when you can, but don't put that on your resume.
Right.
Just put the places you actually have a degree from. If you have professional certificates, mortgage certificates, different licenses if you're going into the certain finance fields. Obviously, accountants, CPAs, CIAs, CISAs, stuff like that. You definitely want those present on there because those are state exams, certified things that you have to do.
Yes. Oh, that makes sense. And yeah, we were discussing, as you mentioned, about like the college degree on over some of like our text exchange, but then also, of course, from your recent interview, Matt was on another show, Dave Wilson's show. I'm all about popping out other
I appreciate it.
other hosts. There's a lot of love to go around, and it was great show. And yeah, I thought that was great that you all mentioned that about right. If you haven't graduated, yeah, unless you're literally super young or, you're close to graduating, in which in that case, you would put your expected date of graduation.
Exactly.
But yes, right. Pretty much, unless you have the degree. If you don't have the degree, just don't really state it. And then the case of, like you said, if someone, let's say, has started something in 1998, or even that's really long ago, but even if it's 2005 or whatever it is, and they haven't graduated, I think it could look worse if you have it on there, because it could indicate that you're don't really finish things.
Well, I said 98 for a specific reason. That's when I graduated high school and started college.
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't finish.
Yeah.
So it's not on my resume, and I've come far enough along in my career that
exactly.
I'm not going back. But yeah, the 98.
Exactly.
I feel old.
And also, you're not applying for
so long ago.
Your job is set, so you're good. But I know what you mean for the more like corporate roles, or some of the roles that your clients are looking for. I agree. That's a good one. You mentioned something, I think, in one of the last questions I was asking you. I think you mentioned something about with the ATS. You were mentioning something with pictures, and that made me think about, I'm curious, I'll give you my viewpoint, but have you received resumes with pictures, and what are your thoughts on photographs of the applicant in the resume?
I'm going to be honest. I'm not a fan of it because, one, a lot of times they don't come through the ATS or the CRM systems. Two, if you want to put it on there so that when you walk in, they have it and it remembers somebody, that's, that might be a way for them to remember. But I would hope the interview helps you be more memorable than the actual picture on the resume. This day and age, I would really suggest you have an up-to-date LinkedIn than an actual picture on your resume, because then and I always suggest having your picture on there,
on the LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn, absolutely. Yes. Always have your picture on LinkedIn. You don't have to it doesn't need to be a glamour shot. I mean, the phones these days are so good. You can literally, if you have a scar over your eye you don't like, go ahead and get rid of it real quick with your your magic filters, but have a professional shot there. Most professional roles are going to go to your LinkedIn and look at it anyway. Some companies will go to other social medias too just to see, but as far as putting it on a resume, a lot of times it does not come through, and for the most part it's not something, I mean, it doesn't bother me. It's just, I just think I don't understand it.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, and I think I'm glad in a way that you weren't like, yeah, do it, because because I'm also of not just the opinion, kind of like you, where normally doesn't really add a lot, but at least resume writing standards is that you shouldn't put your picture on your resume unless it's someone that's literally a actor, actress, an entertainment job where you literally
there'll be obvious reasons to put it up there.
Of course, like if it's if a job's based on, in large part, your appearance, actor, actress, model, then yes, it's necessary. Otherwise, no. I just tell them, because I've had clients say, oh, I have a great headshot. I had one recently that said, I have a great headshot, I'm going to get done, and she's applying for she recently got her degree in occupational health and safety, and she's applying for like related safety jobs. So it's not like modeling. And I
Yeah.
said, that's great for your LinkedIn. I said, but for your resume, I'm all about a great headshot. Please don't
Yeah.
understand, but not. I told her not for the resume. I said, I don't mean to burst your bubble. She totally understood, because also, well, in acting, they call it typecasting, but in the resume and job world, I guess you may call it the same, but you really don't want anyone, in my opinion, giving like preconceived notions of you when they look at your resume. They can, as you mentioned, go on LinkedIn, they can find all that there, but in terms of the actual, they want to see what you look like, they can look it up, but on the resume, you just don't know. It could be something, even if you're the most beautiful person on the planet, you never know if somebody's going to make a judgment.
I'll be honest, and it's happened to me. Being too handsome stops me from getting jobs. They're like, you're going to respect everybody.
Yeah. Such a hard life you have,
Yeah, no, but you're right. I mean, on both sides, there could be negatives. They're like, there's no way. I mean, yes, it's 2023, but it's in the real world. It's like, hey, this person is going to come in here and it's going to be a distraction, and you could be overlooked because of that.
100%, which I mean is, I get it to some degree, but yeah, I mean, anybody
I don't
could
agree with it. I know it's out there.
People could either way. I mean, either way, if they say, oh, we need let's say a pretty girl or a pretty guy, unless you're actor or model, or if they say, yes, it's a distraction, either way, you really don't want them you want them to focus on the things that should be important to your career, which is your job, your accomplishments, not whether, oh, he looks great. He doesn't. Oh, he's, I mean, I hate to throw it out there, but just whatever it is, like discrimination doesn't even have to be race. It could be looks, race, age. Oh, this person, they've done a lot, but they look so young, or whatever the case is. You don't want to, kind of hinder yourself. And you want them to first focus on your accomplishments, and then they can always look up your photo online if they want, but at least if they're focusing first on what you bring to the table versus what you look like, that's really what you want. So
exactly.
Good. I just thought I think that was a good topic to breach, because a lot of people don't necessarily know that. Okay. And same with the address, as you mentioned too. I totally back you on that. Like, it used to be popular in the 90s, I would say, or before, to put your address on your resume, because mail, the internet wasn't popular, so you almost had to, so that people hiring managers could get your application. So it was more prevalent then, because you had to put it then. But nowadays, as Matt mentioned, you really don't want people knowing more, a company knowing more about you than they need to, or a hiring manager. I put on my clients' resumes like their city, state, sometimes their zip code, but honestly, the city and state is fine, but not the specific address. Because then you go into like, I don't know, privacy kind of issues, so to say. So that was a good point that you brought up. Okay, so I think we hit some of those like things to keep in mind on the resume end. So for you, even if a prospect's resume looks good, have you had a situation where on a phone call, something that the prospect did or said made you question whether you wanted to hiring manager? And if you want to share an example, you can.
There's plenty of things. One is resumes not lining up with what they're telling me is a huge red flag. And even, kind of a B level, make sure your LinkedIn matches your resume. If, you don't need, the actual date, but, if your resume says, March 2017 to April 2023, make sure it reflects that on your LinkedIn as well. Right now, like 70% of jobs are found through LinkedIn. And if they're not, people still reference your LinkedIn page. Even if you don't use it as social media, you just have it for job hunting. Just make sure it's up to date and it matches. That is definitely one thing. Another thing is some people put on paper, their skills, and then you kind of walk them through it, and their skills really don't match what they're looking, what their resume says. Um, a good example is like a skill like Excel is widely used in accounting. People will put advanced user, and then I'll ask them a couple questions to kind of lead them. And I don't do like, do you know how to do this? Because the answer is always going to be yes. But I'll ask them a question like, okay, you're an expert on Excel. Up to what level can you do a pivot table and a VLOOKUP? Yes. Okay. Can you explain to me how you do those? And they're very simple functions that people should be able to walk you through, because most accounting people use them on a daily basis. When you get into some more senior roles or some larger companies where they use, 10,000 lines of data, it's like, okay, can you walk me through how to do an, nested if and then statement? And they look at you like a deer in headlights. Okay, well, we're going to call you an intermediate user because Excel has a lot of functions and not put you as expert or advanced on that. Does it always mean I'm not going to work with them? No, but I might have them adjust their resume, for that. People being, I love confidence, but when you're cocky about something, that's a huge red flag in my book. When I go to ask questions and you over explain it or don't answer the question and just be like, yeah, I know exactly how to do that without giving me the details, because generally my questions will lead into kind of like details. And give me an example of a time is something I lead with a lot of my questions. Kind of going back to give me an example of time you made a mistake. Give me an example of a time that you had an issue with X, or you had to deal with taking on learning a new software. And they're like, oh, we went from QuickBooks to NetSuite and I had to learn it. Well, that's really not a great example. It's right. It is an example, but it's not explaining how you learned it. It's like, hey, I'm a hands-on learner. I learned it by practicing with it. If I had extra time when my work was done and I had 15 minutes, because this day and age, for the most part, unless you're in customer service on the phone, most of the time you're going to have a little bit of downtime at work when you can learn something new. A couple other things is, kind of getting attitudes. When you ask somebody something like, hey, why did you leave this job? And they're like, well, why is that any of your concern? Which I've got times. People have said that. I'm like, well, hey. Or if you've had, 3 jobs in the last 2 years and all of them were bad culture and bad bosses, you go through that many,
Right.
I get it sometimes, but what are the chances, that you went through 3 jobs in that short amount of time frame and it was all the boss's reason,
right?
Or it wasn't a culture fit. And it's like, at that point, did you interview well? Did you find out, did you accept a job just to have a job, or did you find a job that you thought you would fit in at?
Exactly.
Those are a couple, examples of people that I wouldn't go through. People, I don't want to say lying, but when you have like a list of like requirements for a job and they just check yes to all, anywhere from 4 to 8 of them.
Sure.
And then when you talk to them and it's like, well, I actually haven't done that for a job, but I understand the concept of it. I was like, well, unfortunately, my client requires you to actually have done this, not understand it. There's a lot of things we can understand and not apply or not actually do. When clients come to us, they have a list of requirements that are hard requirements, which are like, hey, 100% needs to be yes. Soft requirements or nice to haves, like, hey, it's nice to have somebody with an MBA degree, but it's not required, but they are required to have a bachelor's. It would be nice to have somebody that has worked with Oracle software, but it's not required. They just have to have some sort of large software experience, whether it's, SAP, JD Edwards, or one of the other congruent type of softwares. So there's the, kind of the must have, the hard requirements, and then the soft requirements are nice to haves. So if you tell me you've done something on a hard requirement that's not there, I'm not passing you along to the hiring manager.
Right.
Now, might I get another job that doesn't require that? Absolutely. And if you're a good candidate and we're, honest about it and didn't really, push me in the wrong direction, then I'll work with you in the future. There's plenty of times where I talked to somebody today that they're not a job fit for either the job I reached out to them sometimes for once I look at their actual day-to-day responsibilities or they applied, but I could get a job in 2 weeks, a month that is like the perfect fit for them. In this industry, yeah, we get paid to find people, but there's a retention part of it too. So if you go there and you're not able to do the job and you don't last, we don't get paid. So
Yeah.
it's just not having you walk in the door that gets us paid.
That kind of actually reminded me what you said about, like, with you from the representing the company and the recruitment side, wanting someone, of course, it's going to be like for longevity for the company as well as the hiring manager, if that's not you wanting that. When you're looking at a prospect's resume with past history, do you, I'm sure you're probably looking at how long they've been in a particular role. Do you look for a certain time period at minimum that they've been in past roles as maybe an indicator of future,
I
longevity?
do, yeah. So, a basic rule of thumb is like the 3 jobs in 5 years. So if you've had more than 3 jobs in 5 years, that's kind of a red flag. But there could be, explanations to it also. And so, like, I won't dismiss somebody. I talked to somebody actually today that worked for a really great company in Atlanta, out of college from 2020 till June of this year. January. In January, he took a job. He was there for 4 months. They did layoffs. It was one of those first in, first out things. He was looking for work for about 3 weeks. He really needed to get back to work. He took a contract role that was only a 3-month contract that put him through actually till last Friday. So he's had more than 3 jobs in 5 years, but there was a way that I can explain. And that's kind of another reason that it's good to work with staffing sometimes, is I can convey that to the manager, where some managers would be like, oh, he can't hold a job down. He's had, 2 jobs in the last, 8 months. And it's like, well, one he took and they laid him off. He thought it was going to be a long-term thing. It was a step from a staff accountant to a senior accountant. And then the other one, he just needed to work, and he took a contract role. And it's kind of a double-edged sword. COVID gave a lot of people a pass on that because a lot of people got laid off.
That's
A
true.
lot of people wanted to explore themselves and try new things and do new things, and then realize, hey, at the end of the day, I still, I'm an expert in something else that pays a lot better, and I didn't dislike it. I wanted to try something new, but I'm going back to my old career path.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
I'd look at 10-year, but I also look at it as a situation by situation. And a lot of times if you have, like I said, the one guy, he was with the company for 3 years with good tenure. It was a great company, just kind of wanted to see why. It made sense on his resume. He went from a staff to a senior accountant. Why did you only last 4 months here and now, 4 months at this other role? Some people just look at that resume and keep going. So it really depends on the hiring, whether it's a hiring manager or third party recruiter on what they're looking for.
That makes sense. Okay, so that's good to know that generally you hopefully the applicant won't have more than 3 jobs in 5 years. However, obviously it's not a hard and fast, rule for you.
There's a lot of people too, especially in the accounting and finance world, they'll work and get to like a senior level role, making good money. And then they want kind of a new challenge because it kind of the growth once you get to like senior manager, director level, because there's, for a simple like web of a company, CFO, two VPs, like three directors. The higher up, there's less jobs. So there's not really a lot of room for growth. But when you're coming straight out of college, you go staff accountant, senior accountant, lead senior accountant, accounting manager, boom, boom, boom. Within the first year, you're progressing. And then there's kind of a slowdown because once you get to that senior level manager role, once you get up to director, it's like there's so few roles open that, you might not be able to get there. But what a lot of people will do is get into consulting, or work for, public accounting firms, one of the big four, and do that for, a handful of years. And generally those types of roles pay a lot more money.
Yeah.
They're challenging because you're facing new stuff anywhere from every day to, hey, I'm on an 18-month project. I'm on a 6-month project. So it's a new challenge all the time. And, kind of keeps those gears grinding. And then they get to a point they're like, all right, I'm ready to go back into like true corporate accounting. And then they'll go back to looking for a role, in a senior level management type of role.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Very good to know. Are there any, before we wrap up, are there any final tips? I know we've covered some great content, but any additional final tips that you would give to candidates? That can be anything, interview tips, resume tips.
Some basic tips that I like to tell people, as an overall, when you're looking for a job: resume, make it clean, make it look good. Reach out to my girl here if you need some help with that. That's what she does.
Appreciate it.
Follow up on applications. If somebody doesn't reach out to you, reach out to them. Go directly if you see ABC companies hiring on Indeed. Sure, apply for Indeed, but a lot of times you get that easy apply. So do like 30 other people. Go directly to their site. Apply through their site. Try and reach out to their HR people or their internal talent professionals. If that's another one. During the interview, be honest, be vulnerable, but mind your P's and Q's when you do that. No, like we said earlier, nobody's perfect. They are looking for real people to hire. Be honest about what you've done in the past, and if you make mistakes, be honest about it. Also, make sure the job's a fit for you. Ask questions to the hiring manager. I know we said, culture is one of the things to ask about, and it's different to everybody. Make sure it's the right culture for you, whether it comes down to work-life balance, equity, and having a diverse team, whether it's career growth, whatever it is to you that's important. Make sure it's there, and don't just ask about it. Ask for examples from them as well. When you do interview, know something about the company besides who they are. We'll just use if you interview with Coca-Cola, obviously they're a huge company, and they just came out with a new soda line, or they brought back Mellow Yellow, and just mention, like, man, I think it's really cool that my favorite soda is coming back after 20 years or whatever. If a new product's coming out, if something new, just relate to them and know that you want to work for that company. And to kind of wrap it all up is, I know there are times when it might be stressful looking for a job, and you may want to just take something that's there for you. Make sure it's the right fit for you. You interview them just as much as they interview you, and don't be afraid to ask for a counteroffer.
Absolutely. Those are great tips, Matt. And, how can job seekers and or future clients get a hold of you?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. My LinkedIn is my name, Matt Lunny. There's only, I think, 2 Matt Lunnies on LinkedIn.
Oh.
Find the guy that looks like this. You can, either call me directly. My cell phone number is on my LinkedIn. I could throw it out there. It's 561-352-3324. Or you could shoot me an email, mlunny@theboltongroup.com. Even if you have questions, need advice, I even help people with practicing for interviews, and generally, if you're a cool person, I'll do it for free. Just to kind of give you experience talking to people, advice on, how to answer questions that might throw you off. And a lot of it at the end of the day is just answering things confidently, being able to articulate what is on that resume, and giving good examples to companies.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Well, guys, you know how to get in touch with Matt. He's a great guy overall. I'm so happy to
I appreciate
have had
that.
you as a guest on the show, and obviously super useful for those that are looking to get into the accounting and finance world. So definitely hit him up. Thanks so much, Matt, for being my
Appreciate you
guest
having me.
today.
Yep.
And it's a pleasure to be connected with you in general. Obviously, it's just the beginning of our
Yeah, absolutely.
of our collaboration. And thanks to all the viewers as normal, and stay tuned for the next episode of Ask the Hiring Manager. Bye, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Hiring Manager,